Hey, Mickey, you're so fine. You're so fine. You blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey. Hey, Mickey, you're so fine. Are you about to blow my mind? Oh, Mickey. Hey, gang, it is. Right? It is. And how you doing tonight? It is Monday. We love Mondays. It was Meatloaf Monday, but we didn't have meatloaf. And it's 7:34 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, one of the best things about pasta, it actually tastes almost better cold. This was pasta I made, turkey vegetable pasta that I made yesterday. And, one of the problems when you have to gum your food, you burn your mouth. You don't have any teeth to chew, so you burn the roof of your mouth. Talking about burning, there we go. This is sage again. Part of the ceremony is to shamanically cleanse the World Wide Web. Preparing y'all for what is coming, what is here, what's going on. And hey, Mickey. Subi Sales had White Fang and Black Tooth. This is mine. That's my Black Tooth, White Fang. Yeah, here's the white. Here's the Fang. There's the Black Tooth. And welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with your Sensei Al Bob. I am your griot, Sensei Al Bob. And we go on to bring forth entertainment, but not for entertainment's sake, for love's co-creation. Now, don't believe anything I have to say. I mean, remember, who's watching you, baby? Who's watching you? Well, eye of Horus, these are the eyes of Horus, is watching you, And,
As you know, Australia is part of the Five Eyes crime syndicate. It's actually an intelligence service, association, but it's actually in real life a crime syndicate. So I call it the Five Eyes Crime Syndicate. The human trafficking and the directed energy weapon attacks, the systematic hacking and subversion of civilians is identical across the Five Eyes system, and it's using tools that have been leaked by Edward Snowden as developed by GCHQ and NSA. So basically the same software tools are being deployed across the Five Eyes. The directed energy weapon attacks are identical. The gang stalking is identical. So in other words, to me, it very much seems like the Five Eyes are rolling out the same large-scale genocide and extermination program. And this is why Australia is actually just as close to the US and to Canada and to England, and of course also to New Zealand, but Australia, even though it's on the other side of the planet in terms of administration and intelligence agency crimes, it could as well be just moved into Greater London because it is exactly the same. So for this reason, we have to keep a very close eye about what happens in Australia and New Zealand, and talking to victims from Australia, I've heard it now several times that they consider themselves still to be a colony of the United Kingdom, but because as a colony, I mean, Germany, by the way, is pretty much the same, right? Germany is still a colony of the UN.
Hey, it's a colony. And it's more than that. I've told you stories. Again, if you go to xratted.blogspot.com, read my novels. One novel, 7 cuts. It's 3/4 of one of my novels. I've got 26 novels, and I'm writing another 6. And this novel is 3/4 of it, and the thing that's missing is a general directory. And in all of my novels, because they're stories, it's a griot story, right? But it's talking about kind of what's going on. And there are a lot of things, the way I write, because it's a shamanic tool, the way I write, it's a session. The average guy has to read it 4 or 5 times, maybe 6. And then you go, the little bell goes on, bing. You know, why do they have that? You know, when you were supposed to sign up for somebody, bing. It's like the bell is supposed to go on over your head. So you kind of get to know, you know, like. What? Oh, really? And what does your brother say? Those are the 2 brothers. So above, so below. And this is their mother. This is the illuminated one, you know. What'd you say, man? What? We live in a what? Oh, right. But it doesn't, no. That's the only thing, what? The only thing that matters is love's co-creation. Yep, that's all that matters. Anyway, to go to my story, there is a one of the 6 cuts is a story of me going to Australia, all the things I did with the Aborigines, and going like I was in Australia with my first wife, Donna, and we were there for almost 3 years, and finally, you know, we tried to get out. We didn't have the money, and it was, you know, we felt like one of those, you know, prisoners sent there. But you know, they constantly called Australia a prison. No, it's what it was a place where, you know, to send somebody from England to Australia, it was like sending someone from New York City to Mars. I mean, the cost was quite big. And so they only sent, like, a good example is Jack the Ripper. Jack the Ripper was Queen of England, Victoria's cousin, who was the surgeon of the court. And as long as he was cutting up prostitutes, it wasn't a big deal. But when he started going after the middle class, the burgeoning middle class of, you know, storekeepers, you know, so they had to ship him out. You know, they couldn't catch him. Jack had to kind of disappear. And he went to Australia, and as long as he, you know, was killing people there, not a big deal. And so one of the interesting experiences I had was in Australia. And they have 2 parties. They have the Labor Party, you know, the union guys, and they have what is known as the Liberal Party. And that's when I realized what liberals really are. The Liberal Party is the party that, what is a liberal but someone who feels guilty about being racist and sexist and homophobic and basically a Nazi. But they're not going to do anything about it. They're just, feel a little guilty, And that's what a liberal is. So the Democratic Party in the United States is basically people who feel guilty about being Nazis, right? Whereas the, conservative, but not, I wouldn't quite, not all Republicans are this, but the Conservative Party is just straight up sociopath, wacko, Hannibal Lecter. I ate his liver with a fine, wine. And so Australia, so I was there in 1977, and that was, here you kind of blur your eyes and, you can pretend that's not what's going on, but that's what's going on. But in Australia, because it's a place bigger than the United States, they have more resources than anything. That place could have fed the earth. When they got there, they had like 15 feet of black hume. And because these, they're out in the Pacific and these weather typhoons go in and out, what happened was they brought sheep and cows that ate the grass right down to the ground, and the water come through and wash the dirt away. And after 125 years of that, what they got is deserts out there. And so, and you go out there, and the white people think it's desert out there, but no, there's so much water because there are these, like, you look this way, it looks like a desert, but you go walking about out there, and they have these like little versions of the Grand Canyon, they're about 50 feet wide, and they kind of go on forever. And the water is unbelievably deep in some of these places, right? And it's not just, like we have drainage ditches. No. So everything out there is mystic in proportion, right? And it is, right? And so anyway, we were there 3 years, and again, I won't go on about this story, except to say where we're going to go tonight through our guided meditations out there in the outback into to live with the Wallamajiri and go walking about with them, right? And going the experience of that. But you should go read the story I have about going to Australia. How I was like not abducted, but meaning I understand and am or have been brought here by those guys who abduct people. Now, not the American government who dress up like ET, but the spirits that are from all over it is, right? And I was in the toilet, the John flight 007, a 707 going from Hawaii to Sydney. And when we were right over that divide between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere, I was taking a whiz, and I pushed that little button, and the water started going down the John, clockwise, and then it slowed down, and then started going the other way. That's when you get the southern hemisphere, the water goes down the John a different way. So it kind of mesmerized me, and I was off into another land, and I was like, it was all dark, all these little sparks were going by, and I heard a voice, talk to me, saying, hey, how you doing? You're doing a great job, glad to see you, and they tried to explain to me from this moment on what I thought was real no longer existed. And everything I saw out there, I would see the curtain had been pushed away, and I would see the whoa baby. And really the only kind of reality was like that far from my nose. Everything else was like, wow, an illusion. I'd be seeing more and more of that. And, or the other way around, everything out there, this far, that was what really was going on. And the only kind of thing that I could, the illusion that kept me comfortable was only about that thick. and it would get thinner and thinner. But one of the things, so I was there, and my friend was the Gary Trudeau, the guy we're going to go see. Neil Curtis. What was Neil's last name? He was a political cartoonist, and he was like the Gary Trudeau. I mean, he had really sharp wit, and took no prisoners. And when we were there. When we landed, they were having martial law, right? And his bread and butter, making money, making political cartoons in the newspaper, was against the law. He couldn't do it. He couldn't make fun of the government during martial law. So he did a thing, How to Draw Albert, where all the characters in the kind of cartoon were animals, Australian animals, koalas, the guys that bounce around, koala bears, things of that nature. And the only human was me, Albert. And it was just like animal form, right? All the animals and me. And I was the human character that was constantly being put into juxtaposition of the political shit that was going on in Australia at the time. And once, we landed and we got settled, the whole, again, go read the story. And people would come up to me, "Hey, you!" And yeah, it's me. And they go, and half the people, because it took me about 3 weeks to realize that my friend was making a comic strip, making fun of me, and all of Australia knew me, but I didn't know all of Australia. And half the people wanted to buy me a drink, and the other half wanted to beat me up. So it was an interesting environment, but it also made me kind of like invisible to the powers that be. I never got in trouble. I was in the middle of a lot of things, never got in trouble. Anyway, we were there, and then relatively quickly, martial law went away. And then, got a life, got a job, did this, did that, did all kinds of traveling, et cetera, et cetera. And, but when I saw that, Australia was a colony, right? And everyone who lived there, it was like a prison place. And they hated Americans, but they loved them, right? They wanted to be Americans, right? And it was quite interesting. And so it was also like this very strange reversed it was like being in a mirrored funhouse. You saw all kinds of things that reflected on America and England, and you realize that America was a too. I mean, when you were there, I kept bumping into the reality that, the things that ruled the world was the Vatican and the City of London and the District of Columbia. Vatican was like the old school, the Holy Roman Empire kind of did it through religions, and all the religions, they had a lot of religions, but they were all coming from the Vatican, whether you were Jewish or Muslim or Church of England or any other flavor Christian, it was still coming from the Vatican. There were all these guys in black robes, and there were all these churches that made no sense. They were like, like the one I invented of the Church of the Holy Rolling, Most Supplicating Oven Mitt. Just really wacko churches, and they all went back to intelligence agencies, and that's when I realized. And when I was in Alice Springs, Pine Gap, that's where you think the NSA, the CIA, Langley, Virginia, that's where the spookiest of spooks are up there, because it's out in the middle of nowhere. And my wife and I, when we were taking the bus tour, we kept getting stuck in certain places, and the universe kept sticking me there. And we got stuck in Alice Springs for 2 weeks, and it was just full of Nazis, paperclip Nazis. It was unbelievable. And time goes by when you're having fun. Anyway, so in the 2 years that after we got off the plane, the Queen came back, and you know, martial law had gone, and we kind of walked into martial law. Meaning, we weren't there when they were, getting into it. We didn't know, their democracy and that martial law. And we just were like, got off the plane into martial law. And it was very bizarre because we could virtually do anything, the little crimes they didn't even bother people with. But if you said anything against the Queen or the government, they put a bag over your head and took you out into the desert and shot you in the head and never saw you again. I mean, it made V for Vendetta, their government, look nice. And it was all on a Disney, platform. It was like, and then it kind of, okay, martial law's over. Everybody kind of go back to what it was. And by then they took away the guns and they had this and then blah, 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 blah. Anyway, and I was like, whoa, I wonder, it was like so much like America, but anyway, so we do all kinds of things for about a year and a half. We really get into it. People love us. We actually have kind of careers. We're living there, and it's beautiful. You like Southern California? Well, Australia is like that to the max, except when the storms come through, and then it's like, go watch the movie The Last Wave. And that was made in the 60s or 70s, and our star was the guy who was Dr. Kildare. And anyway, so we're going through life, and we're in Melbourne. And the Queen's coming to visit because they're going to have the first election before after martial law. And again, they have a two-party system like we do, not like the party thing that England has of all these different groups that come together and make coalitions. And in a lot of ways, that's a better government because you get seemingly more representation. When you have a two-party system, it's either Coke or Pepsi, and there's no difference. Anyway, so the Labour Party, this was the last gasp of the Labour Party, and they had a Labour leader who said, fuck that, we just had martial law. Everybody who wants to get rid of this, kick the Queen out, kick the corporations, we are a corporate state, let's be Australians, right? And this guy was like, wanting to be like Ireland, he was like, let's get rid of the Romans. He kept calling the English the Romans, and so they ran, and they had an election, and they tried to, fiddle it, and they couldn't. The Labour Party won by like virtually 98% of everyone who could vote in Australia came out and voted. And what was interesting, and at that moment, they had a paper ballot, the kind of ones we have, where, and then you put it in the machine, and the machine reads it, and they take it out, right? Well, you were either a Labour or a Liberal Party, and they were two different colors. Right? I think the Labour was green, and the other one was pink or yellow or something. Anyway, so they were definitely, you could tell the color of, right? And then there were these gigantic blocks that you kind of put an X in. I mean, you really, and so it was pretty, and so the thing would go in, and you got to keep your ballot, the thing read it, spat it out, you went home with your ballot. So, and they have, it's not one day, it's like a week's worth of voting, right? Because it's a big country, it took a long time, so the tradition is a whole week. So, but in the modern days, so anyway, but they don't announce it for a week. You got a whole week, you can go anytime you can. I don't know what they got now. They probably have nothing. It's just like, you get what we give you. Anyway, so the Queen came for, about a week before election. And she was going to stay there 2 weeks and go visit her people in Australia and New Zealand, and then go home. And she lands, and for that week before the voting week, and the voting week, pretty much everyone in Australia got vacation. The government said, okay, unless you want, no one has to go to work. You're going to get paid. And if you do, you get paid a little bit more. And anyway, so pretty much the Queen showed up and nobody was at the airport. They all went to the beach, and so, she went to Melbourne, Sydney, Adelaide, Perth, and then she was going to go around and see the outback. And nobody showed up. I mean, nobody. I mean, they had, she landed in Melbourne. She landed in Sydney, and they came from the airport down, and there was nobody out. I mean, the city was emptied out. Everyone went to the beach, right? And she was like looking around, and she was like pissed. And she had a funny hat like that. My Elizabeth look. And her husband and her son. And so so she went around, and she didn't last. And when she came, I think she went this way. And when she came to Melbourne, the people were out not to greet her, but to throw tomatoes at her and dress up like an old doddering fool, and really give her a hard time because they're still pissed off about martial law just a year and a half ago. Anyway, so she doesn't stick around for the election. The election occurs, and there are people out in the streets. When she was around, and except when she went to Melbourne, and people were like throwing rotting vegetables at her. And so when they had the election, it was pretty much first, second, third day. It was pretty much people on TV. And who'd you vote for? Labor. Labor. And then they stopped having that on the news. And then it's still another 3 days to vote, and they're not even talking about it, right? And they start having marches in all the cities where people are got their ballot in hand, right? And it's just a sea of green because people change from the Liberal Party to the Labor Party, and it's just like it was like my hat, green and green, and there were no red, slips, just a sea of green, all with a big X on Labor, and it was pretty obvious that Labor was going to win. So night of the announcement, it's coming down to the wire. Labor won by 98%. And everyone went to bed, and they were showing the mock-ups of what the newspaper is going to see in the morning. Labor won. We're getting rid of, and they ran on the whole thing of pulling away from England, not being a colony, not being part of the uber alles England, getting rid of the corporate state, kicking all of the spies out of Ayers, not Ayers, but Pine Gap. And the Labor guys on TV, when I went to bed, the Labor guys said, and tomorrow when I take the thing, because they take it right away, not like, 3 months later. And I'm going to start signing these executive orders to get rid of all of this, and we're going to be Australia, right? And I went to bed, and I woke up, and there was a test pattern on the TV, and there was no newspapers anywhere. And the streets, were full of guys with machine guns and tanks. Another martial law. Like within, a space of a year and a half, two bookends, right? And this guy on the Labor Party came out. Okay. We are, this is a very tough time for our country, and we don't want the communists to take over, and they're at our doorstep, and we have to national security, and we really have to. The Labor parties are commies, and they're now illegal, and there's only one party, the Labor Party, and we're going to have. This month-long version of martial law. But if you say anything, do anything, there are going to be some pretty harsh things, right? So we just kind of took off, right? And went out to the countryside and had a good time. But that was Australia, and that is still how Australia is. And Australia. So, and you don't even hear what's going on there. And it's really, so Australia is, there's more coal in Australia than anywhere. And they're like digging it up and sending it to China. And there's more steel, so all of the stuff that China's making, they're getting all of the resources. And environmentally, like when I was there in 77, 78, 79, so we would go swimming in the Great Barrier Reef. It's like, I'm so glad I saw it then. It was just so beautiful, so amazing, right? And then, now it's dead. I mean, all these great environmental things that I saw are dead. Dead, 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 dead. Deader than dead, dead, right? Oh, and it was like a heads up of what it is, right? So,
it's, crisscross. And Wednesday noticed that the birth date was wrong all the time on her mother. So when, in these cases, when they refer to her mother, they might sometimes got the name right, but they got the birth date wrong. And Wednesday cottoned on to this, if I remember correctly, because she insisted that her mother is not to be referred to as a case number. She's to be referred to by name because she's a real person. And that was a very smart move, because when you give the name, you give the birth date, you always identify the person, right? When you have a case number as a front, well, the identities of the people can get mixed up in the background. Because, oh gosh, these case numbers, they're all just like letters and numbers and, heck knows, you can mistype stuff. But you can't get it wrong when you're looking at the name that's very individual and the birth date. So smart move from Wednesday Kennedy, right? But that's what uncovered this. And I also remind you that this is a trick that was used in the case of, Gerald Carroll. Okay, the Carroll Trust, the Carroll Foundation, where they asset stripped Gerald Carroll by setting up companies that were like his and were called like his companies, but with a spelling mistake.
Spelling mistake. The spell. That's why I write the way I write, to get rid of the spell.
Which is their state of being. If they change their state of being, they no longer want to control anybody anyway. So whether we expand beyond their box or whether they expand beyond their own box, the control system must fall either way. Either they don't want to control anymore, or they ain't going to be in control, because the expansion of human consciousness is going to bring an end to the control. But once you expand your consciousness, you are accessing, and anyone can do it, levels of awareness that not only give us the picture of what's happening, which this control system wants to keep from us, it also connects us to what we call protection. Because we create our reality in our heads like a computer decodes information from the wireless internet. The base construct of this reality is an information waveform construct. And just like the wireless internet, it's here, all around us. And we are decoding it through the body computer into a holographic world that only exists in our head. Therefore, what we decode dictates our experience. And if we are of a state of expanded awareness that is accessing higher levels of knowledge, information, awareness within this construct, and we do not fall into the trap of decoding the belief that we can be taken out, the belief that we can be stopped, that we can't be stopped. Because if I do not decode that information, I can be stopped, I can be assassinated through from the vibrational, through the electrical into the holographic. It cannot manifest in my experience. It cannot do so. And the number of whistleblowers that I've come across over the years who have constantly told people, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this before they take me out. What are they doing? They are falling into that information construct level that says, I can be taken out. I'm allowing that into my possibility. I probably will be taken out. I don't know how long I can keep going now before they take me out. It is me war medals and the war wounds because I'm a hero. And to put it in layman's language, they're expecting it to happen. Of course they are, and that's the whole point. And so it comes from that construct through to the electrical, into the holographic, bang, bang, self-fulfilling prophecy. It's not, it doesn't have to be self-fulfilled.
And that's why David Icke hasn't been whacked. I mean, he's been doing this close to 30 years, right? That's what I like about this guy. He's like the granddaddy. Now, I used to be talking about that kind of stuff about, from about 1977 till 1988. And that's when I said, And the group of people, it was like the same group, and there's the same 7 people, at every conference. It's like nobody was there. It was like, in the beginning, it was kind of fun. We did things, we played with toys. There was a group of us who were mad scientists, and then we were like, it was just like the movie Indiana Jones, the first one, where the suits come to visit him in college and say, what is this thing, this boxy thing? What the Nazis are talking, what is that? He goes off, finds it, figures it out, wants to take it back to his little lab and play with it. And they said, well, great job, Mr. Jones. Now we're going to take it and hand it over to the expert. He goes, what are you talking about? I am the expert. Right? So we, we're exposed to lots of technology that we could play with. And that was kind of fun. And then everybody in the crew, I mean, they were already, Preston Nichols, Al Bielek, and about 5 other guys were, was fun. We did some fun things. Preston had this little house out in Long Island that he rented, and he moved all his toys over there, and we'd go out there and drink beer and swirl the universe around. And they all worked for, things like Lockheed and Grumman Aerospace and Sperry, and basically their little heads were drilled into. Now me, I was just a wild, crazy guy who wore hats and was an artist and was I did TV shows and radio shows, and I had all kinds of fun things going on. And I was just there as the minister of fun, and I made our little adventures like a party, which kind of, lubricated what we did. But after a certain point, it was no longer any fun, so I left. And that was one of at that time, that's what kind of always saved my butt from whatever, because I didn't let, as I said, I didn't get scared. I didn't let any of that into my morphic field, right? And I still don't. People go, how do you, like today, spent most of the day at doctors and blood tests and getting scanned again. Because I wasn't feeling too good about 2 weeks ago. I went to see my doctor, and he said, well, you haven't had any real, other guys tested you. And I'm looking at what they say. Well, I haven't tested you, so I signed up for some more tests. And that's what medicine is. Medicine in America, the way HMOs get paid are not by making you well, but by doing procedures on you, right? So you got scoped and buzzed and prodded and took blood, blah, blah. At least I had a good, what do they call those people who take your blood? Phlebotomist. I mean, she took it right away, didn't hurt, didn't leave a mark, I mean, she left that, just that little thing. But sometimes I've had my whole arm black and blue because they're like, I can't find your vein, So anyway, I was at the hospital most of the morning, and it was very nice. The people who I knew who were usually at the front gate, so they had a new girl there, and she goes, I mean, she was like a robot. Right? And she goes, you need to fill out. I said, no, I don't need. I'm in your computer. I'm under this. I said, and I went in the back where you're not supposed, it says, don't go beyond this one. Well, I went past the point. I went to her boss, right? And I said, yo, where did you get this one? Goes, what are you talking about? I said, she's not treating me right. Come on. And so he comes out and he pushes her out of the way and says, I'll take care of him. So he never comes out of his way big, back, beautiful office on the corner with the sunlight. He comes out into the dark hall of the waiting room and he pushes her out of the way and goes, here you go. He says, he has to pay the copayment. He says, no, he doesn't. He never does. And so, he then put a code, pushed the button, and there's a whole bunch of people in that waiting room. And before I could even sit down, the door opens, goes, yo, you, come on. So I mean, it was right at the time I was supposed to be seen, so I did. And he says, so what's up, blah, blah, blah. I say, hey, I need those tests. You go, oh, yes. He gets on a little computer, bing. I don't even walk out and wait in the waiting room anymore. I just go to the back hallway to the phlebotomist, right? And piss in a cup and do all that. And but if I had just been, let that robot into my morphic field, I'd still be in that waiting room now. Right? It wasn't like I was mean or pushy or anything. I just knew what the score was and went back there and did it. And here we are, 43 minutes and nobody here. It's 8:16, I am on dreamy, dreamy land. The little bells should have gone off. I'm going to go all the way through this, even nobody shows up. And basically, because it'll be on my channel and people can go back and see it, right? And this is going to be a good evening's guided meditation. Right?
You don't know what the heck's going on all this time.
I have no idea.
Actually, I think it's really funny myself. And here you are at the ripe old age of nearly 70, and you're still trying to figure it out, and you don't even know whether you've done yet what you've come here to do.
That's exactly right. And the reason why is because I'm not even sure what it is I'm supposed to do to start with. So how would I know if I've done it? I've always known that I have always had this otherworld connection. Even as a child, I went out of body. I had spirit entities coming into my bedroom when I was 6 and 7 years old. I saw things and I went out of my body. That's another experience when I was 8 years old. I went out to a terrible accident, but I was there and saw the accident happen. I came back into my body and told my parents what had happened. The next morning in the newspaper, exactly what I said happened, exactly as I said, because I was there and I saw it. And I was there at the accident and saw all the details of what happened. And the next morning in the newspaper, exactly what I said happened was in the newspaper. And so I've had aliens at my window at night in Florida. When I wake up at night, I'd see this little creature at my window. Because I was a little kid, I pulled my bed up next to the window. And in Florida, it's very hot at night. And so I pulled my bed right up next to the window. I have a screen. And because I would like to lay in bed at night, look at the stars, and talk to the spirits. And I would wake up in the middle of the night, and there'd be a little head would move.
Whoops. What was
It
that?
would not move so quick, I didn't see it, but it would move.
So that's Jordan
I see it,
Maxwell.
Immediately.
The guy's like me. You know, go look at his thing. That was David Icke before that. And before that was Dr. Catherine Horton. She's quite the pistol. I really like her. Boo-ba-doo-boo-boo. Boo-ba-doo-boo-boo. Oh, here's our Emily Windsor.
Wrong with that, but we have to realize
What do we have to realize, Emily?
that that's just some idea, somebody's idea. Although the one that I saw, the series I saw on servants, okay, upstairs, downstairs, and the whole series on servants really says a lot to us in this generation who are dealing with, who have to deal with the immigrant situation. Now, here in California, where supposedly there are umpteen million undocumented illegals and many, 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 many immigrants, I never see them. I don't know where they are. Neither do I know where the people are who lost their homes up in Paradise, or that was something like 15,000 homes, okay, or where the people went who lost their homes in Santa Rosa. That was another 10,000 homes, and in Middletown, that was another 800 homes. We don't know where these people went, okay, and that's not being reported. So the causes and effects of dislocations are not being reported. And of course, the tribunal situation with so many indictments is not being reported. And changes in the weather, the geoengineering is not being reported. And the biological genetic engineering of new bugs and viruses and fungi is not being reported.
Ooh.
All right. So reset? Are we going to have another reset because things are so corrupted? That's not being reported except by the churches who go back to the old book and read from the old book to get our attention to the fact that there are some issues to deal with. Okay, so what is going on in facts and causes and effects is not being reported, what do? Well, being of the old school, I fall back on what is called intuition, all right? And what does intuition buy you? Okay, first of all, there's deja vu, okay? And that's when you walk into a situation and you feel as if you have been there before, that there is something familiar going on there. And what I infer from deja vu is that's a situation that is worth getting involved in to dig deeper. All right, there's the situation of having to locate a lost item. You lose your keys.
Yes.
Okay. Do you ever do that?
You ever do that? I do it all the time. And I say, Tony, come around. Something's lost. Gotta be found. And that's a little cue to my subconscious to look through the Akashic record where I left something. And the other thing is I lose things and I can never find them again. And then a year or two later, they'll pop up someplace. It's like it went out of phase with time and then it kind of came back in, you know? Like Dragon sent me some stuff and he put it in a nice little bag. I should have held on to it. I did. I was holding it close to my heart. And then it disappeared. I remember putting it someplace safe. Every time you do that, that's really when you lose it. Oh, this is important. I'm going to put this someplace safe, so I'll find it. It's like Al Gore with a lockbox, you know? Anyway, let's see.
We investigate UFO reports. We promote. For whatever odd reason, I decided that I wanted to do a complete download of his massive website. I considered it very important. The next thing I know, and I mean 2 days later, I'm not kidding, I learned that he had died.
Usually that's the case. And I'm sure that guy said, you know, you better listen to this before I die. Thing is, I'm not going nowhere.
Died. There's a crazy coincidence for you. His old site stayed up for about a year after that, but then that was gone. And I, at a point shortly after that, asked his widow if it would be fine for me to put a mirror of his site up on my own site at Keyhole Publishing, which I've now been able to do. So you can see these videos.
Look at Richard. He looks like a
Here's one
kid.
from the same mission, STS-96. What you'll see are two objects moving perpendicular to each other. This is over New Orleans. There's it going up, and then horizontal. Resolution's not the best, I apologize, but you can see this pretty clearly. Here it is again, slowed down. Again, it seems odd to me. What you find in a number of these cases as well is that the people operating the cameras are very interested in following these debris, if that's what they are. Here's one from another mission a year later, 2000, STS-106. What you'll see, it's hardest to see in the first take of this. It's actually easier to see when it's sped up. But you'll see a series of objects in a kind of...
Are you serious? Are you serious, folks? Welcome to another powerful program. And wow, we've got a barn burner for you today. We need some help with this one. Matter of fact, we got breaking news just now developing. President Donald Trump gone wild. Last night, we know that, basically he fired the Secretary of Homeland Security after making a trip down to the border along Mexican border there in California. He must have had a bad round of golf in Vegas, and he showed up Sunday night, called the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirsten Pearson, into the office. And by 5 o'clock, he's tweeting she's resigning, gone, and chose her replacement. Then, just a couple minutes ago, he has just fired the director of the Secret Service. This is a strange situation, but he's upset about that Chinese woman getting in Mar-a-Lago with that malware and all that spying equipment. And President Donald Trump followed the ouster of that Homeland Security Secretary with another pink slip. Just a moment ago, he fired the director of U.S. Secret Service, a man that had been with the agency for 40 years.
Well, maybe he
There's
needed
a
to
new
go.
Secret Service director coming in by the name of James Murray. But Randolph Tex Alis is gone. And so, wow. What's going on here? Bad mood? Or is this part of the shakeup that he does? Or is this part of the draining of the swamp? Or is there another agenda? We need some help to understand it all. Get some tea right now. And our guest is with us, Ronnie McMullen from GetTheTea.com. Ronnie, what's going on?
How you doing, Pastor?
I'm doing all right. I've been drinking the tea. I've been healthy. I haven't had the flu all winter. I mean, I feel great, and I've lost weight. I mean, it's happening for me. I've lost now 19 pounds. I'm feeling great.
Woo. That's good. That's rocking. Yeah.
And part of it is from the tea. There's no doubt about it, because it does cleanse you.
He's been smoking the tea, kids. Yes.
That tea, can I just throw this out there?
He's smoking the tea.
Trump.
Drinking and
When
smoking
you're
that
getting your
tea.
You're placing your orders through GetTheTea.com.
Get
Would
the
you put
tea.
it there? Would you say, I heard this from Pastor Paul Baker?
Yes,
Let 'em
he's
know you
getting
just
the
what you're
tea.
finding out about your tea
He's
and
smoking
you're
that
following.
tea.
So,
He's
Ronnie
putting
knows,
the tea in
you
the
guys are,
brownies.
staying diligent out there.
Yep,
The free
yep,
shipping.
Yep. Free shipping.
Ronnie?
Hey, what's going on, Ronnie?
On the show. What's going on here with President Trump? Is he in a bad mood?
Boy, I don't know. He's tweeting away. He's the tweeter of tweeters. Seems he's firing everybody around him now. You know, maybe this is draining the swamp. That's their terminology. Maybe he had a bad day at golf, like you said, which I've never heard he's a real good golfer anyway. Maybe he is.
He's a cheating guy.
I don't know. But
He cheats.
My idea, and I don't know if this is a truth, so I hope your people don't go get mad at me or something, but I'm just going to throw this out there. Just throw it out there.
Throw it out there,
I'm
Ronnie.
a food for thought kind of guy. I'm not
Yep.
saying this is the truth. I'm
It's
saying
not the truth.
I wonder.
I wonder.
First of all, we know before he got into office that he's a billionaire.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. That just means he got a lot of money. But usually, when you have that kind of money, you've done a few nasty deeds to get there. Now, not always, but more than likely. So my thought comes to the fact that maybe it's possible that we have the hugest movie going on right now starring Donald Trump playing good cop. There's good cop, bad cop. We know the establishment's bad cop. We know that they've got their old cronies in there doing all these stuff.
Oh, yeah, just like look who's in his cabinet, all the banksters.
Maybe. But Donald Trump comes along and he does a few good things. But here's the thing, Pastor, that catches me. Is he was going to take care of Hillary Clinton and bring justice to the American public for what Hillary Clinton's done. Never happened.
That is a good
He was
point.
going to
Lock her up.
healthcare
Lock her up.
an abomination. Never happened.
Never
Good
happened.
point.
But
But
he gave us a nickel on our taxes. And when I say that, I'm being facetious a little bit, but he immediately gave the public tax break, which everybody wants their money, they want their pocketbook. So, which they don't realize that the cash cow, if the cash cow goes down, your pocketbook's going to.
who did he give the tax breaks to? Corporations and the billionaires. Most people who are the working Joe, they saw their taxes go up. This guy is interesting.
Extraterrestrial beings. Geller was mystified by what was going on in his brain by all of this. Now, whether you think about Uri Geller as being genuine or not, or a player or not, or whatever, Geller is pretty open and honest about his relationship with Buharich. He didn't like him, he distrusted him, and eventually he cut off relations with him.
That was the CIA guy.
As I said, Ruth Payne finds Lee the job at the Texas School Book Depository. So then in New Orleans, after the assassination, Garrison remembers David Ferry, Jack Martin, all these guys, Guy Bannister. He conducts his own investigation. And he finds that all of these guys were bishops in a church, except for Guy Bannister. Who was
Just like in
the
Australia, it was a lot of them.
of the Vatican in New Orleans. And then Guy Bannister and Fred Krisman were the guys who jump-started the UFO thing in 1947 after Kenneth Arnold. So he calls in Fred Krisman. Guy Bannister is dead. He died in 1964, again, mysteriously. So Fred Krisman then is called in. He's interrogated. Nothing much comes of that. So what was the secret space program, from my point of view, from the 1940s? We bring in Nazi scientists to the United States. In 1947, we have the famous Roswell incident. The Roswell debris, we know, is taken to Wright Air Force Base, eventually Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field at the time, which is the same place where we bring Walter Dornberger, Werner von Braun, and everybody else preliminarily. We bring them all together. All these guys are together in 1947 in one place. At the same time, we have all these UFO sightings. We have Nazi scientists in the space program. We're afraid the Russians have the bomb. As it turns out, a lot of people had the bomb in those days. We have a group of wealthy Americans.
The wealthy Americans had the bomb.
Militarization of the paranormal. And they make this contact with this extraterrestrial group called the Nine.
Just like the Boule and the Tool in Germany in the 30s.
The Nine. And it focuses on this strange bit of connections. We have this family, this group of families having a seance in 1952 in Maine, talking to aliens in a spaceship hovering over the Earth, they say. And then later we find tendrils leading out from that seance directly to the Kennedy assassination, among other things. But the Kennedy assassination being the most important and the most obvious one. If you follow the Kennedy assassination, you may know of a guy called George.
Hey, it's one person. One person's watching. Woo!
In some way. Lee Harvey Oswald and Marina, he was involved with them.
Hey, who are you? One person.
Before he has to give an
Come on, chat away.
About all of this. In his book, his notebook, his address book, when he was after he was found dead.
Oh, look at that. Just when that one person showed up, it was 1 hour, 1 minute, and 1 second.
By so many bishops and so many members of the Nine, the poor guy had no chance, you know. I mean, he was basically surrounded by people who all felt they had some sort of mysterious mission. And Lee Harvey Oswald was
oh, and they left. They were scared.
Oswald himself didn't have much of a connection this way. Connection to military intelligence, probably. That fluency in Russian, which should tip you off right away in those days. But the rest of the connections to the Nine, to the assassinations before and since, are incredible. They're astonishing. We know the CIA was playing for the Kennedy assassination. We've all heard the stories. What we don't really remember is that the CIA at that time not only was involved in protecting Nazi scientists as much as they could, and other Nazis around the world, Nazi war criminals, involved with the Vatican, as I think we've all heard. I'm working on a story right now that I hope I'll be able to publish by the end of the year, involving the monastery route in which the Catholic Church really deliberately helped a lot of very famous Nazi war criminals escape, giving them Vatican passports, safe houses. Some of the story you've heard already before. But what we don't really realize, the CIA, at the time of the assassination, for instance, was heavily involved with another Nazi organization, the Gehlen organization, which was running agents for the CIA in Eastern Europe and against the Soviet Union. Again, just like in Paperclip, these Nazi scientists were not really working for us. They were taking our money, they were giving us phony reports. They were virtually useless against the Soviet Union. As it turns out,
they caused the Cold War.
When all the chips are in, when all the information is there, we find out they've been sabotaging us as well. Alan Dulles was protecting Nazi war criminals since before the war ended.
And his brother.
In transcripts of speeches.
And those guys, they were the lawyers that wrote the
going back to 1944 and 1945.
the First World Armistice.
The fascinating thing about Alan Dulles, bringing all of
the Versailles Treaty
of these disparate things together, was that he was Mary Bancroft's mistress. Okay, Mary Bancroft was the friend of Ruth Forbes Payne Young. During the Warren Commission interviews with witnesses, and you can read this in the Warren Commission transcripts, look for Ruth Payne. Read her. She appeared twice before the commission, talking about what she was doing in the days and weeks and months leading up to the assassination, how she knew Lee and Marina Oswald, all of these questions. Alan Dulles is part of that committee. He's sitting in. At the point where Ruth Payne starts to talk about her trip to Philadelphia to meet Arthur Young, 2 months before the assassination, 3 months before the assassination, Alan Dulles cuts her off and changes the subject. He does not allow her to finish the story. Read the transcript for yourself, you'll see it. It's blatant. Alan Dulles, who's been quiet the entire time, suddenly jumps in, like a defense attorney, and then suddenly says, oh no, we're not, let's talk about this instead. As she's about to say who she met, who she was dealing with, Alan Dulles changes the subject, changes the story. Her information about Arthur Young never makes it into the record. and she hasn't talked about it since. What was going on? Alan Dulles and Mary Bancroft. Mary Bancroft was Ruth Forbes, Payne Young's best friend. There was a very deep connection there. Alan Dulles knew ahead of time, he had to, about Lee Oswald, Ruth Payne, Marina Oswald, and all of this. And he was desperate to cover up that part and make sure it never made it into the record.
Oops. Woo!
So we have a lot of wild stuff going on, including the fact that Ruth Payne,
Hey, it's an alien here.
husband, Michael Payne, was working for Bell Aerospace. So what do we have? We have a Garrison investigation alleging there was a conspiracy in the Kennedy assassination. The problem with Garrison trying to prove all of this is that he had a cast of characters nobody would believe, right? He had Clay Shaw, who was an unbelievable character on his own, the man that he was trying for the assassination. But he also had all these other characters. He had all these bishops. You know, he didn't know what to do with these bishops. He couldn't understand that the bishops were a front for an intelligence operation. He suspected it.
Just like I
but
saw
he
in
didn't know where to go
Australia.
with it. Paranormal researchers, UFO personalities like Guy Bannister, like Fred Krisman, and of course employees of NASA. All of these people can be tied
Who started
back
the X-Files for the
can be tied
FBI.
back to the Nazi space program, the people that we brought over. This was all part of the problem. This was all part of what happened. Secrets were kept. There are still classified documents on the Kennedy assassination. We know that thousands of documents have yet to be declassified. Thousands of documents on World War II. Thousands of documents on the Admiral Byrd expedition to Antarctica. We've classified so much in the United States alone. Now think of your own countries. I did a lot of work in Latin America. People who know that I was in Chile in 1979 researching the Nazi influence down there and trying to find out information about Nazi technology that had been smuggled to South America. Under military dictatorships in Latin America, of course, there was no information. Secrecy was the order of the day. Documents were classified, shredded, burned. Things went on for 20, 30 years in Latin America, we'll never know. And yet, many of our Nazis wound up there, in Argentina, in Chile, in Bolivia, Uruguay, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador.
Go Google
Peru,
Argentina,
everywhere. There were Nazis in hiding
1950s
all of these places. They were scientists, they were SS officers, they brought technology, they brought money, vast
infusion.
sums of money under Otto Skorzeny. All of this was being brought and developed into programs. Perón used to brag about his own space program, developing a new jet system, a new faster than speed of light kind of thing that he was talking about and bragging about, because he knew he had Nazi scientists there working for him. The author Joseph Farrell, very good researcher, has written about the Bell, has written about alternative sources of energy that were being developed by Nazi scientists in South America, in Bariloche, very close to where I was detained in Chile, on the other side of that border. So there's a lot of secrecy yet. We know history, only the declassified portions of history. The world that we know is based upon what we've been told. We can read books about history and feel that we know what's going on. But I can tell you, the history of the last 100 years is largely still classified. We live in a kind of dream world, thinking that we know what actually happened.
Dreamy dreamland.
Right now, there's information that the Japanese had detonated an atomic device in August of 1945 off the coast of Korea. And there are Japanese intelligence officers who come forward with the story who are insisting that it took place. If that's true, we have to rewrite the end of World War II, right? Then we have to go back and say, wait a minute, what really happened? If we talk about paperclip, the way I was taught in school in the 1950s and 60s was that the Nazis these were good Germans. Werner von Braun was never a Nazi. Dornberger was never a Nazi. All these guys were on our side. As it turns out, it wasn't true. As it turns out, they were sabotaging us every step of the way. Our space program was the result of Nazis trying to stonewall us and to prevent us from getting there, until eventually, after Sputnik, they were told, you better do it or get out. So that's what happened. We sold our soul in the United States, and not just the United States, believe me, other countries as well, including the Soviet Union. We sold our soul for this technology. We dealt with some of the worst war criminals in history. Not just even the Holocaust, but the idea that they had slave labor that they worked to death and replaced with other slave laborers. And these people who employed these slave laborers deliberately, who were involved in every step of that process, including the killing of these laborers also, were the people that we brought over for the space program. Our space program
70,000 of them.
in people, on the one hand, like Jack Parsons, who once wrote that he was the Antichrist. He was a brilliant man, but he
Started
believed he was the
JPL.
Antichrist and was ushering in a new age of witchcraft, according to him. And he was a follower of Crowley and a member of the Ordo Templi Orientis and all of this. A very brilliant guy, but a very strange guy on the one hand, and we had the Nazis on the other. You know, these were the people that were jump-starting the space program of the United States, starting in 1936 and going up
In the
until
national
we're all
security
on the
environment.
So we have to go back and relook at this history and ask ourselves,
These are the guys who
why
gave
was
us
it so
what we got
necessary?
right
Why
now.
was the space program militarily necessary? Why did they work for the Army? Why did
DARPA,
they sabotage
internet.
the process as much as they could? Why did the Army allow Nazi scientists to wander off the base and do whatever they wanted to do, communicate with whomever they wanted to? Fort Bliss, Texas is on the border of Texas and Mexico. That region in the 1940s was like Vienna during the Cold War. It was a place where spies hung out with spies. It was rife with all sorts of intelligence activity. All sorts of things were going on in that border area, all the way from the California, Mexico border, all the way from Texas, all the way to Brownsville. There was.
Oops. Well, you know, just played a lot of interesting stuff there, but you can go on my playlist and watch the whole thing. And no one has shown up. I now know what Emily feels like. Anyway. So where did you guys go? It's 8:45. I've been on it now for an hour, 11 minutes, and 11 seconds. Oh. And there's no chatting. Unless there is chatting. I don't think there is. Where is it? Live chat. Got it. Jane. Videos unavailable. Trouble getting on myself. Nothing is as it seems. Video not available. I wonder what that all means. Anyway, I'm gonna end this stream and go over to my other channel, see what happens.